I think I was just reading about Sailaja before this session, and I think two things that stood out for me. One, she started her career in GCCs when Cognizant was done and Bradstreet as a GCC, so that was that, and now it's turned full circle where she's running and leading the GCC practice for Cognizant. I think secondly, she said this herself, so I'm just repeating it. She was the first GCC head for a services company, and everybody else followed after that. So she's really set the precedence of how service providers are really calling out GCC as a service line. Sailaja, I'm going to go a little off script and start a little bit from what Rajesh said, right? As somebody who's been in this services sector for the last 2 decades and plus, how do you see the current environment, right? Is it volatile? Is it interesting? Is it exciting? Or is it scary, right?
I think, as Rajesh said, VUCA, right? It's all of that. I think exciting because the kind of technology development that we are seeing on a day-to-day basis is unprecedented, right? I mean, last 2 years we started with AI, generative AI to agentic AI. I think it's been like a leapfrog, right? Today, all of us use a ChatGPT or a Perplexity, how probably we used to use Yahoo in the older days, right? So I think it's, to me, exciting. What's also challenging is the fact that if we don't keep up, we will be left behind. I think that's the reality. We have to keep up. We have to keep upscaling ourselves so that we know how to use these tools and look at how we can apply them in our day-to-day business. I think that's a very important skill going forward. And I think I'm speaking to a room full of leaders here. And how do you set the tone as a leader? Right? Not just embrace, but also drive it in your respective organization. I think that's very important. So absolutely exciting. But I think 2030 is going to be quite exciting.
Yeah, so every change or crisis is an opportunity, right? And how we leverage that is really up to us to shape it. Let's get to the GCC theme, right? I think Rajesh covered a lot about the numbers and how the growth trajectory, it continues to be solid. But I want to focus this conversation on not just the numbers, but the impact and the value that GCCs will bring to the table, right? So if we are making the shift from cost to revenue, how are you seeing that shift? And how do you think the provider ecosystem in India, not specifically Cognizant, can really be a partner in the shift?
No, absolutely. In fact, and maybe my colleague from BCG will do a 2x2 matrix, right? I won't do that. But I think, we are seeing a shift in terms of niche activities that clients want to undertake in their GCCs. So to me, it's not an or, it's an and. It is service providers and the GCC ecosystem. We are seeing that it's a coexistence, right? Certain services, we all know, we call them almost commoditized services. Historically, a GCC would start with an F&A operations or a HR operations or your ADM type work. Gone are those days. I think that's where, the disruption is huge. And those were the cost arbitrage-led conversations. Today, it's more about value. How can a GCC drive enterprise-wide agentification? How can we start to drive new product development in our GCC? How can we tap into new age talent who will question and challenge the status quo? How can we kind of drive new op models? I think those are some of the conversations, and we are seeing clients approaching their GCC with very specific objectives. I want a data and analytics COE. I want an agentification COE. I want a very deep domain-led proprietary kind of COE to be, centered in my GCC, which obviously they wouldn't want to give to a service provider for, IP kind of concerns. So that's a big shift. It's no more scale. I mean, some of us who've been in the industry would agree, right? We used to tell them, hey, listen, your GCC is not up to a 500 or 1,000, think about it. We don't say that anymore, right? These days, there are GCCs which are 70 and who do tremendous high-end value work for the client. And they're based out of here. I mean, if I look at analytics, you would have a bunch of people from our, statistical institute from Kolkata, and they do modeling and they do underwriting. That's very niche or actuarial kind of work. So I think that's a big shift that I'm seeing. And their remit no more is limited to India or offshore.
So do you see, if I can cut you there, Sailaja, do you see the fact that the GCCs will do all this new emerging work or critical work? What's the role that they will look for their service provider? Is it to say, here's my F&A, go change it, right? Is that the equation you are seeing, or is it still a blend of the others?
I mean, if we look at 2030, I don't think FNA
I'm
as a
talking
function
today.
will look.
I'm talking today. So.
I think, the way I see it is both ends. Like with anything, there's polarity. There are some who want to have everything within and want to have full control. So there, the distinction between an FNA to a high-end operation is not there. But there are some who are very laser-focused. They say, look, I've already got a large vendor footprint, right? And these services are being delivered at scale, at quality, and there are these relationships we do not want to disrupt. Now I'm looking at what on top of that. How can I deliver value? So the narrative often is that. And also when they're setting up these value-added services, they definitely want to take our best practices. Like, how are you deploying AI? Can you kind of help us do the same? I think that is a kind of collaboration that's coming out these days.
You talk about AI-first GCCs. Tell us, how do you think about an AI-first GCC?
I think, I look at adoption of AI, I think, I would put it in two ways, right? One is, what's your strategy and how do you plan to execute? I think everybody is jumping into execution without really spending time on strategy. Where do you see your strategy? Where exactly do you want to deploy? And even in AI, there's a journey. You will not start off with high end. You will not have suddenly a very intelligent AI come into your system. You will have to train it. It needs to kind of get the context of the organization. I think that is one. That alongside three dimensions for me. One is talent. Then the second one is the work itself that we do, how much of that can be agentified. And the third one is the workplace, the kind of collaboration spaces, the sandbox environment, the experimentation, that you want to set up in a particular space. I think that requires a lot of deliberate design. So AI first GCC comes with starting with AI at the core of everything. Like, are your talent upskilled? I mean, we were joking, right? Oh, I want somebody who is got 5 years of AI experience, and we're looking at that JD and say, who wrote this? It's impossible. So we have to invest in our people. And I want to emphasize on that, because if we don't invest in our people, then they become the biggest bottleneck. They don't want to adapt because they see it as a threat, right? And I state that with leaders, and again, it's confidential in this room, right? If we do not know how to use AI, then we'll be scared of it. Then how would you lead by example? So we have to invest in training our people, giving tools to the people so that they start to embrace AI. You need an innovation ecosystem, which is very important. And GCCs are greatly placed to drive innovation at scale, because you're within the system. You can sit there and go back and say, hey, hang on, why do we do this? Right? Something that maybe sometimes a service provider can't do, right? You got that luxury there. And then does your office space really encourage collaboration, experimentation, sandboxes, tools available for, fail quickly, fail fast kind of setup? So I think those are the dimensions that are built into an AI-based GCC.
So what, and you talked a little bit about the talent supply and the reskilling imperatives. How are you thinking about what are these critical skills that GCCs, as we navigate to 2030, I don't know the beyond, so I'll just stick to 2030, will really have to focus on? I mean, one is obviously doing all the technology stuff that we are doing, but are there other key skills that will be important for tomorrow?
See, I think we've said this all along. I think change management is definitely a skill that is required, because we are driving change at scale, not just in the GCC, but also in the enterprise. I think that's big. The second one is, how do we drive, or rather, what are the right opportunities for AI? See, one of the biggest challenges that I hear from our clients is ROI. Yeah, we want to deploy AI, but where, how, and what is the ROI? I think to be able to really identify those opportunities is very important. One of the biggest skills we think is actually finding fault with AI. We think people who can actually do that, who can do QA on AI, is going to be a very niche skill. So being able to train our people to do that, not just get caught up in the hallucination, I think that is very important. And what we are seeing, at least I was reading elsewhere, right? There seems to be a greater success rate with small or narrow language models as compared to the LLMs, right? Now, how can you develop that? How do you ensure that it captures the essence of whatever domain we are into and not get into, giving fake details? I think that's going to be a very important skill set. And interestingly, none of these are technology roles that I have spoken so far about. The tools will come in, but it's the contextualization which is going to be very important. And last but most important is the leadership. How do you want to lead your team in this space? Not just from the offshore GCC, but also how do you plan to collaborate with the onshore stakeholders so that the AI journey is taken together? I think that is something we often underestimate. We get very caught up on the technologies, but if the leaders here are not empowered, and if we do not have the right reach out into the CISO organizations and the CTO organizations, adaptation becomes a big challenge. So stakeholder management, being able to influence people who are onshore, is a big skill that is required.
No, I want to build on the ROI point that you really mentioned, right? I think a recent report that Rajesh talked about, Future of Technology Services, one key insight was that global companies are more and more focused on enterprise ROI because they've done a lot of cloud and digital investments in the post-COVID era. And I think they're really not seeing the impact or the outcomes out of that. At the same time, you can't escape the AI wave. And you have the whole cost pressures, right? So how do you navigate all of this?
If it was simple answer, then it would be easy, right?
That's the business, right?
That's the business. But I think to me, and this is where strategy is important. How exactly are you prioritizing, right? Are we just adopting AI because we have a tool available, or we now have it available in all our systems, we have it on our phone, we have it in our desktop? Where exactly do you want to develop? 2, I also subscribe to fail fast. You would want to start off with areas which are the low hanging, like you become your client zero. You start with, okay, do I want to become my internal chatbot? I'll give you a few examples, right? Many people are looking at the HR assistant to be a generative AI, right? Because there the chances of you can experiment a lot more and you can easily branch off to a human in case the AI doesn't do that. One area we found a lot of merit is being able to take procedures or policies and quickly convert them into training materials. Right? In this market, especially where we say, oh, there's attrition and we need to train people and the work is coming through, it's a lot easy for us to use AI to do that training material, right? Start trying small and then we can move on to the next one. Second thing is, how data ready are you to take this at scale? I think without investing in data, we cannot directly jump into AI. And that's where probably the ROI is looking a little skewed, because the data cleanup is actually costing a lot of it. So have a data program, have a prioritization program, celebrate quick wins, gradually move to the more complex ones. So in terms of, it's almost like a CMM model that we move up the curve, then you're able to kind of call that. Also, I don't think that one agent will give you an ROI. It's a cumulative ROI. When you invest on something, when the whole stack is kind of completely automated, that's when the ROI starts to kick in. So it's very difficult to measure, at a project level, like how probably we've done it in the past.
No, I think very well said, and I think there are no easy answers to these discussions. Sailaja, the other point you talked about was collaboration and innovation ecosystem, right? So if you see India, you've got the large service providers, you've got a mid-tier companies, you've got a very large GCC footprint, you've got the startups, you've got all the big tech companies. But somehow the big tech collaboration with many GCCs is still getting run at the global enterprise level, right? How do you see that changing? Will some of this, if the SAP team is here and the GCC in India is really working on that, can they really partner to do this in India rather than routing it to some other route?
So I think we interact with a lot of hyperscalers. I know they're very interested in supporting the ecosystem, right? And this is probably where the op model or the org design plays, right? How much of that decision-making, empowerment, engagement can be done from the leaders here? And that's something maybe I will request all of you to ask for, because even the big tech firms, their teams are actually located in India, right? And they absolutely want to come and partner. They want to kind of work with us. Are we allowed? I think it's more a permission, right? And to me, we have to earn that permission. And I say we, the GCC leaders, have to earn that permission by putting the business case, building those networks. It is definitely possible, whether it is with the big tech or with the startup ecosystem. We know quite a few firms who run actually hackathons with some of the innovation, startups and stuff like that. But how much are you able to drive? And which is why I said change management is important. It's not easy. If the thought process is that GCC is still a labor arbitrage and, it's like the back office of our firm and, we'll get like cool stuff done there, but we want all decisions to be onshore, I think that has to shift. But it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Some firms are quite out there, some firms are not. But if together as a leadership team we can push towards that, I think we will start to see a difference.
I think on the startup collaboration, there are a few examples, but again, nothing that is truly scaled, and we can call this as a real example of how do you take that forward. I know we have Maruti here, and Maruti in India is doing some phenomenal work with how they're working with startups in India and helping take them to market. I think we need many more such examples for the GCC world also. I know we're going to run out of time, Sailaja, but quickly tell me a little bit about IP creation in the GCC world, right? There is all this talk about high-end services. Can I do drug discovery out of India? Can I build my products, platforms out of India? We see a number of retail GCCs that have built their entire, e-commerce backend out of India. But the perception continues to be a people, talent, skill play, right? Is there something that needs to shift from an IP creation perspective?
I think we probably don't advertise it as much as we should, right? I'm sure you'd agree when we come to forums like this, we then realize, oh my God, there's so much happening in this ecosystem. We don't necessarily publish a lot about it. How much of a thought leadership are we publishing, from the GCC ecosystem? Every example you gave, Sangeeta, we know use cases, right? Healthcare has done some amazing stuff, especially with AI. Whether it is, pharma has done a lot from an AI, from, drug analysis and stuff like that, new drug creation. We have all those use cases, right? But how much are we talking about it? We probably talk about it when we come into a forum like this, and the few people who hear, we know about it. I think we need to do a better job of marketing. That's my view, to say that, look, all this is happening. The second thing I probably would request is, whenever you have your principals visiting from onshore, expose them to the industry. All of you have 1 or 2 visits every year, right? Typically, GCC visits are there. How much are they exposed to the industry? Are you doing a roundtable with, our consultants? Are you doing a roundtable with peers from the market? Are you doing a roundtable with providers like us? Because we can actually come and say what's happening in that particular domain, what is cutting edge, what's the art of possible, and how somebody else is doing that. I find that those conversations help convert people, to lose that mindset of it's about cost and cheap labor to, hey, no, this is where we can drive innovation. As I said, it is change management, and it has to be person by person, but we have to do this. Often I find the executives' calendars are packed, with just internal meetings, and, yes, of course, that's equally important, but where is the external point of view that we are bringing for our executives?
No, we see quite a few of them where they reach out to Nasscom, where they want us to get some startups for them or other GCCs for them. So it happens, but I think it's not very, very broad-based, but we do see that happening, Sailaja, and I think that's a good point on how do you expose the India ecosystem, right? So if you are a financial services GCC, I mean, not just the ecosystem you talked about, but what's India doing in UPI, what are Indian fintech startups doing? So I think it's so much more than what's happening here. I think just moving to the last question, which is around 2030, right? And, how do you see the next, whatever, right, few years and beyond playing out? I know when we started this decade in 20s, we said this will be we came up with the phraseology called Techade, right, where technology will define everything. How do you see 2030? And what do you think will be the whole GCC ecosystem be that time? Will it definitely will not be in its current form. It will be the global enterprise. It will be the hub for innovation globally. But any other thoughts around that?
I think a few things, right? And I say this, I got this paper, I call my, probably we are analog, my son is digital. I think that's a big shift that I'm going to see, right? I think the workplace is going to be very different. We have seen this big shift to hybrid post-pandemic. I still see what we call as office space or what we call as, desk space. I don't think it'll exist. I think what will exist is a collaboration space. The collaboration tools are going to be hugely developed because people want to collaborate from across the group. We've seen a massive shift in the recent times. So to me, those tools are going to become increasingly, I think very good. The so-called timing, I think some GCCs will still say a shift, this shift will be there, that shift. It's already blurring. I think it's going to blur big time. So I don't think we'll be expecting people to come in during a particular time. Somebody may choose to come in when they feel like. Somebody may continue to work from home. They probably would have all the amenities to work from home, co-create, co-design, and not feel any difference between whether they are in the office or not. I mean, all of us, I know we all spoke big time about metaverse. It could be that your avatar is working in a virtual office, right? Come 2030, because then your physical office, is a moot point. It's quite possible, right? And these guys who are coming, they do exactly the same in the gaming, right? You have your virtual avatar, and that's the generation that we are hiring, right? So the concept of a physical space, in my view, is going to be hugely diluted. Collaboration across time zones and across the globe, I think, is going to get better. Some of the things we see as onshore, offshore, I think that line is going to completely glow. It's more about, hey, who has the idea, who's driving the project, and how can we align? And we should be able to create those virtual pods as compared to your physical pod. I think that's going to be a big shift. I think the talent itself is going to become AI native, right? That it's already there. We are going to take a lot of things that we do today manually for granted, assisted by AI. I think everyone will have a personal assistant. That's kind of there. They will have a personal assistant who will do their odd jobs, who will do the calendaring. There is almost a pseudo you who will do all of that. And your focus will be more on value addition and what you're looking at as, value creation for the organization. So it's a big shift that I envisage in the next 5 years.
So the decade of abundance, if I can say that, right?
Yes.
Where you really will choose what you need to do, but not do what you need to do only, right? So,
and I think I just want to add, I think in all this, the newer generation is going to look for purpose. And that's why the strategy is important, because if we can define what we want the GCC to focus on, right? What is the purpose of the GCC? I think the talent will really start to bring their best. So it's important that we strategize that.
Thank you so much, Sailaja. This has been a fascinating conversation. But I know we have some very good power talks coming up, and look forward to staying engaged and really working together on seeing how do we define the whole GCC provider ecosystem narrative and programs for India, really.
Absolutely, Sangeeta.
Thank you so
Exciting
much.
time to be here. Thank you.